from the state representative candidates or their representatives. First on our list is Jacob Bramel, so please go ahead and 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
I want to go ahead and start off and say, take a good look at the stage right now. 80% of your success is just showing up. But I've heard a lot today, a lot of people say their accomplishments, speaking about their accomplishments. I want to take a little different approach to this. I'm Jacob Bramel, and I'm running for state representative because it's times like these, here in Illinois, where we have to come to the realization that it is more of a risk to keep following the old ways. The same path that has been tried many times and failed, that has led us into the darkest of corners with no way out. It's times like these where we search for new light to guide us. A generation that have bared witness to these dark times. It is times like these where we have to look at liberty in a new way. That the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of self-empowerment. The American dream is well and alive, contrary to belief. If we are to unleash the American dream, I say again, if we are to unleash the American dream, we need to eliminate the dream busters. I quote a local man who is a strong pillar within our community, who is humble in his own footsteps, and I consider to be a statesman. That's former State Senator Gary Dow, and he stated these exact words. It's not about the next election. It's about the next generation. And I, myself, I'm a part of that next generation, so thank you for being here tonight.
And filling in for Jerry Long, please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Kevin Missel. I'm from Streeter. I've lived here all my life. I've lived in LaSalle County all my life, and about 3 years ago or so, before Jerry Long ran the first time against Frank Montino, he was looking for people to join his team, and he came to me knowing that I had a history in the media, and he said, you know, we could really use your expertise. And I said, well, I'd be willing to help. What are you all about? And ultimately, what it came down to for me joining the team was that the Republican Party had a disconnect with working people. And I really felt like at that time in 2013-14 that we really needed candidates who could identify with working families, working men and women of the district. And I feel like the first comment that was made tonight was a slap at those working men and women. Jerry Long, as you know, is a truck driver. Jerry Long fully intended on being at this debate. He took a load from Cincinnati to Rockford last night, and because he quit his job in the last election, he's at the bottom of the list. And when he got to Rockford, they said, no, you can't go home. You're going to Louisville. That's where Jerry Long is. He's on his way to Louisville. He's delivering freight. And I'm proud to support him. The Republican Party has to, it must, connect with working people. And there's no greater candidate to do that than Jerry Long.
All right. And again, for the audience's sake, Andy Scoop, the Democrat in this race, is not here tonight because he informed us that he would not be able to be here tonight. So we'll go ahead with the questions, and question number one is, Governor Rauner is calling for schools, townships, perhaps cities even, to consolidate to reduce the number of governments and save taxpayers' money. How do you feel about that? And we'll let Jacob Bramel go first. 2 minutes.
The biggest thing with consolidation is you have to look at the chart of if it's going to be more beneficial to taxpayers or if it's going to be more beneficial to keep them not consolidating. And there's a fine line where that has to be drawn. If we were to truly give value back to taxpayers, we have to find out and determine where that line is. That line right now in the state of Illinois is completely out of control because we're in fiscal and moral despair. It starts out with our budget. We have to work into our budget and build our tax base back here in the state of Illinois before we can start looking at other options. And contrary to disbelief, if you look back into the state expanding their tax bracket in 2011, We actually lost out on $3.7 billion of revenue because people decided to leave the state. So we do need to start looking at areas where we can consolidate our governments. We have the most taxing bodies, and we have one of the largest state governments in the United States of America. So that would be certainly something I can get behind on Bruce Rauner's agenda for his turnaround.
All right. And Kevin Missel on behalf of Jerry Long.
Yeah, we absolutely, we've got, over 7,000 governmental units, and it's been a topic up here on this stage tonight. We do need to look into consolidation. We've got, obviously there's task force looking into that. I think that if you're going to solve the problem, Illinois has a lot more than just a revenue problem. We have a spending problem in Illinois. And I think that you've got to look for ways to cut. We've got to stop expanding programs and trying to balance the budget on the backs of the taxpayers every year. Talking about this tax hike, trying to go back from 3.75% back up to 5%. And that's just something, we tried it once, it didn't work. And we're seeing jobs leave the state en masse. And I would appeal to even the, the people in the audience who maybe you have a state job, maybe you work at a government office. It's going to be hard to keep state jobs if we don't have jobs. If we don't broaden the tax base and expand the tax base through economic growth. That's really the key to where all this starts. Then we can look at, trying to do consolidation and find other creative ways to cut it.
I think everybody in this room knows the problems that the state of Illinois is having over the budget. How do you propose overcoming the budgetary impasse? And how urgently do we need a state budget? Jacob, why don't you go first?
Well, we could have used the budget 8 months ago. Currently, right now, what we have to do with the budget is we have to look at building our economic climate here in the state of Illinois. And when I say build our economic climate, is we have to attract jobs and investors. Our tax rate is one of the reasons, and secondly is our political climate is so unstable, there are people that don't even look at Illinois as an opportunity. We have great workers here. We have great private sector unions that have great union members that go to work in these manufacturing jobs. Illinois, between 2000 and 2016, has lost over 300,000 manufacturing jobs. We have Democrats up in office that say, well, we lost those jobs, but they've been replaced with other jobs. You cannot lose out on jobs that are paying $25, $35, $40 an hour and substitute for minimum wage jobs or jobs that earn $5, $6 above minimum wage, and you still claim to have the same tax bracket. We have a hole in our budget that lawmakers have not accounted for because we have lost that income from those well-paying working class jobs. We need to get those jobs back so we can broaden our tax base. Right now, the Democrats' answer is that we are going to tax less people more. We need to have a larger tax base so we can tax more people less. That is the key to economic growth here. And what I would like to see tallied out behind that is a cut in our income tax at 3.75%. I do not want to see it go to a progressive scale. I want to be able to see it gradually cut as we bring more jobs here to the state of Illinois. And with this mixture of cutting the income tax little by little each year as we build our job growth, Illinois is going to see additional revenue on top of that. Because we've already seen what happened with the tax raises in 2011. We lost $3.7 billion because one person leaves Illinois every 5 minutes. And we lost that tax base.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think the important thing about the budget to recognize is that it's the job of a state representative and of a legislator to prioritize how they spend money. That's just their job. They have to choose between one thing or the other. When you don't have a budget, when you have a governor and a legislature who has different ideas on how to prioritize, that really hurts the people who are affected by those programs that don't get funded. And so what Jerry has talked about throughout this campaign is prioritizing spending. If you're going to talk about doing something, then that's where the priorities are going to be. And if we're going to talk about cuts, then we're going to cut. But the point is that you've got programs for the elderly, for the physically and developmentally disabled people. And people that, senior programs and stuff, if you just go around and say, nope, we're not going to have a budget, then those are the people who are affected, and those are the people who the programs were created in the first place.
The next question pertains to Governor Rauner's proposal to reduce the number of unfunded mandates governing all government entities, but particularly in regards to education. So, Kevin, we'll start with you. How does where does Jerry Long stand on the calls to reduce government mandates, particularly the unfunded ones directed toward education?
Yeah, we should. We absolutely should, because unfunded mandates are very unfair to our local schools. Let's face it, we've got, I mean, I'm from Streeter, where Streeter Elementary struggles every year with the budget, just tough dynamics for them. There are ways of, the state can't come in and say, here, do this, and then not provide the funding for it. That's micromanaging the classroom. Really, and what Jerry has said before is that the people who know the classroom best are the teachers. If we have a school system where you have parental involvement, and then you have teachers who know what their students need, why do we need an unfunded mandate from the government that wants to micromanage the classroom? That's silly. Now, as far as the school fund, other additional school funding and stuff, we need, I believe, and Jerry also does, that when it comes to funding, we need to fully fund the schools. I think when it comes to the pension, we need to fully fund the pension. If our legislators decide to fully fund something, then fully fund it. And the unfunded mandate actually goes completely against that theory. So I know for a fact that Jerry would support getting rid of some of the unfunded mandates.
Mr. Bramel, state a question on that.
Yes, when it comes to unfunded mandates, this goes back to even to my military service. When you have unfunded mandates, the federal government and the state governments physically tell you, you have to do this. So it's left unfunded, and it's up to the local communities to raise the taxes and fund that mandate. So what that does is that breaks down the leadership here at the local level. And then in return, it makes our local level governments, our city managers, our city clerks, those who run the counties with these unfunded mandates have to raise taxes. It makes it look like they're not doing a great job. And personally, that's a bad form of leadership. That's almost walking into a room and having people read your mind and then walking out and saying that's the stuff you have to do. When it comes to unfunded mandates in the school, I oppose all unfunded mandates. I think locally, everything should be handled at the local level when it comes to our schooling and education. One of the things that I have been contemplating, that I have been explaining on this campaign, is that it's non-negotiable for me as a candidate. I want to see increased school funding in the K through 12 areas. And I want to see a majority of that funding go into STEM programs. Those are your science, education, or engineering, technology, your science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs. Our school funding formula also needs to be revised. We need to also look at ways that we can lift all the school districts up together without pulling funding from one school to another school. But when it comes to these unfunded mandates, it develops into bad leadership. I will oppose every single unfunded mandate that the state of Illinois has to offer standing up here. I would rather see that if it's absolutely a necessity, we see a grant program where if counties come up with a certain amount, we'll match that amount so we can take the burden off the counties and the local governments. Thank you.
Yes, back to the pensions. I need to continue to bring up the pressing items. The state in our report has unfunded pensions of $111 billion, just a mere 111. Their unfunded retiree health care benefits are almost 46 billion. Did I say that in the report? We're in the B's now, the billions. So overall, the state is in a hole by $184 billion, or $45,000 per taxpayer. The only way to fix this is it's a shortfall. We either need to bring more money in or take less money out. Do you think that the revenue from job growth will ever cover this hole? And what other ways do you believe there are to either bring more money into the system or take less money out of the pension systems?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. First of all, this is an issue that Jerry is well versed in. Obviously, as a union man, he spent 30 years in the Central States Teamsters Union, so he's got some experience in this. He's actually taught me some things on this that I didn't know before. But as far as, first of all, let's get this out of the way. If we're talking about cutting, arbitrarily going in and cutting pension benefits that union workers have paid in for, that is unconstitutional. Not only unconstitutional, that's immoral. If people paid into it, they deserve it. When it comes down to it, we do need to grow the economy. That's the solution. I know that everybody understands we need to grow the economy. But it can't be, if we do any sort of modification, it cannot come from top down, from the governor, or within the legislature, or even from the court. Where it needs to come from is a union. And so what really should happen here in this case is you've got, let's face it, our state is broke. And if we get to the point to where we're losing jobs and we're starting to see state workers' jobs being cut and cut and cut, then if the union wants to come in and modify, do an MOU, modification of understanding, that would be one solution. But that would be the only solution to cutting the cost of it. Because if the union won't agree to it, it is absolutely immoral and obviously unconstitutional to go ahead and cut that pension.
Now this comes from raw data numbers and a political science standpoint, and there are many that have answered this question that no, it cannot be funded, even if we grow our tax base significantly. They're unfundable. And the reason being is because it should not be left up to the unions when the state lawmakers have been using that money and taking from that pile to fund other obligations that did not have funding to begin with. So we should not push this off onto the unions and say it's the union's fault. But instead, right now, our pension is costing taxpayers 25% of our general fund. Our general fund has not been balanced in almost 2 decades. At this rate, and even at the rate before what was promised, it was unsustainable. There are people who brought this up that said, this is just physically, mathematically impossible with the numbers that we're getting. So eventually, the Democrats have hidden the problem with a $40 billion hidden borrowing scheme to try to meet the obligations. They build up one fund, as soon as that fund gets built up, they're paying out the obligations, and they're waiting for another fund to get wrapped up. Well, eventually those funds deplete, and we're seeing the tipping point in the public policy with our pension funds. This is something that's going to need structural reform, and this is something where myself as a candidate, we have to reach across the aisle and come to a bipartisan solution. This is the #1 reason why we're having the problems that we're having in our budget here in the state of Illinois, is we need pension reform. Why haven't we gotten it? People have been demanding it for a while now. Yes, have they tried to make some moves? Yes. For a political venture? Yes. And the Supreme Court ultimately struck it down because it was, like Mike said, unconstitutional. However, we need that structural reform, and we need it now if we're to continue moving on as a state. There has been things that have been proposed by your non-establishment lawmakers, but they're far and few down there because the establishment is bending over the taxpayers right now, and they're just handing it to us. And this is something that's been brought up time and time again, and it needs to be everybody's obligation. This session now and next session to come to true reforms on this. Otherwise, this is going to be the piece of policy that single-handedly sentences Illinois to death.
The last pension reform was a bipartisan agreement.
Yes.
And you said that we do need structural changes. But again, the courts did overturn them. So how are you going to get over the courts overturning those reforms?
I have been talking with the current representative who sits down in the legislature right now, and there's actually a bill that she has proposed. And what it does is it transfers some things around. I don't have full knowledge on it, but she is a person who said there are people getting on board with it. It's just a matter of when enough people get on board with it. So they are trying to come to a bipartisan agreement to fix this and work around the courts. But it's something that does need to be addressed so we can go right back to our budget and get Illinois back to work.
Kevin?
I just think that that's probably part of the modifications of understanding. There's just no way around it. If you can't go around the courts, you can't. Look, if somebody paid in, and they paid into their pension, it's theirs, okay? You don't just take that away arbitrarily. So without union consent, there's no other way to do it.
All right, let's go on to our concluding statements is what I'm trying to say. And we'll go ahead and give 2 minutes to each of you. First, Kevin Missel, the representative for Jerry Long tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Art, thank you for inviting me. Last minute change, I got called, Jerry called me about 11 o'clock this morning. He said, hey, I need a representative at the meeting. And I'm glad to be here. I work very closely with Jerry on all these policy matters and a lot of things. So I'm grateful to him for the opportunity also. I do want to say that, I talked before about the Republican Party needing a broader appeal. I think that if you look throughout the history of elections in LaSalle County, or I'm sorry, in the 76th District, in 1991, the lines were redrawn, and Frank Martino stepped into that seat. In 2001, the lines were drawn to make it even more Democratic. In 2011, the lines were redrawn to make it even more Democratic. And each time the Republican Party put up a candidate, it was somebody who was a social conservative, much like Jerry Long, very pro-life. Maybe they put up somebody who wasn't pro-life. Maybe they put up a moderate. Maybe they put up a Tea Party type. Whoever it was couldn't, they fell short. The closest election Frank Martino ever had was 26 points. In 2014, we found somebody who fell 336 votes short, less than 1 percentage point, of taking the seat from the Democrats when for 30 years we've been drawn for Democrats. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a candidate in Jerry Long who has already established himself in LaSalle County and in the 76th District as the candidate who can win this seat for the Republican Party. I ask that you would consider voting for him on March 15th. Thank you.
And Jacob Bramel.
This is our closing statement, right?
Yes.
Oh, that was quick.
You guys were quick.
Well, I figured there'd be more issues to talk about than I'd like to state right now. Well, first off, you heard it best. We have a candidate who aligned himself up with the establishment and is aligned right by the establishment. I ran on the basis of serving the community because there wasn't anybody to step up and serve the community for. And so I want to leave here on a good note with everybody because I guarantee there are Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, and conservatives here, and we all stand for one thing, that's a better state of Illinois. Today, it's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's about the elites versus everybody else. If you truly look for a candidate that believes in limited government and freedom, you don't have to look any further. He's right before you. The conservative principles were founded on the basis of limited government and freedom in our lives. And if we are to truly limit government involvement in our lives, we need to get them out of every nook and cranny in our lives. I have proposed solutions to make that happen. I have talked about issues in the paper. We have politicians that don't care about the legacy that you want to hand down to your children and that you want to hand down to your grandchildren. We have politicians right now down in Springfield, and the true conservative Republicans that are working for you are a super minority. There's 10 of them, because those are the 10 that voted not for Frank Martino to become our state auditor. And look at our state auditor now. Political promotion of economic development in our state is inherently futile and oppressive. It rewards incompetence. If incompetence is rewarded, incompetence will continue to be the product. When incompetence is the product, it is then that politicians will insist that increased regulation in our private sectors and increased planning in our private sectors is the appropriate remedy. Nobody wins from this. It's the government interference that starts at the beginning in our free market principles that develops this corruption that we've seen. And it's been happening well since the 1880s with subsidization programs at the state and federal level. Illinois doesn't need any more establishment political representatives. We don't need any more Republican establishment representatives. We don't need people that are going to charge forward with the status quo. That's been tried many times and it's been failed. America needs to start turning the basis of liberty. We need to attract market-driven entrepreneurs to the state, not political entrepreneurs that find their wealth through programs through the government. We need these marketing entrepreneurs that will bring jobs and investment to Illinois to lift up all of our residents. When people have steady careers, this will automatically create the cuts necessary to entitlement programs to help drive a balanced budget. This is why I ask for your vote March 15th. A vote for Jacob Bramel is a vote to represent you, not the Republican establishment. I'm Jacob Bramel, and I'm running for this district. Thank you very much.